Yeah, welcome to a Terror House Radio episode number 56. Live once again, I am Matt Forney, your charming and loquacious host, and the founder and editor-in-chief of Terror House Press. I'm joined by Benjamin Welton, is the author of many books, including our most recent book coming out this Friday, Scattered Scenes of Sex and Violence. We may or may not be joined by Bryden Proctor, co-host and producer. Everyone's favorite diabetic ball of sadness and deep vein thrombosis. Said he was going to be here, but he may not make it because he's having internet issues. I don't know. Keep him in your hearts and prayers. His trip into the Peruvian jungle to sample ayahuasca went very well, I would say. But Ben, thanks for coming on the show once again.
Thanks for having me. I am 100% positive the Terror House audience, both as readers and as radio consumers, hate me or sick of me by this point. But I'm glad to be back.
We're gonna shove you down their throats. Like you're going to enjoy it whether they're going to enjoy it whether they want to or not. Speaking of which, before I mention anything else, if you have questions for myself or Ben or Bryden when he feels like coming on, you can send a Streamlabs tip to streamlabs.com/terrorhousemagazine, and we will answer your questions and comments later in the program. But Ben, let's get right into it. What is Scattered Scenes of Sex and Violence? A very interesting book. It's a bit of a departure from the works of yours that we've published thus far. You want to talk a bit about the book?
Yeah. So what the book is, and it's a very short book. I would assume everybody can read it in about one sitting. So this book was my attempt at kind of summarizing some of the harder to define experiences in my life. And when I started writing it, I realized that there was two themes that kept coming up again and again: sex and violence, which is not original. I mean, people have talked about sex and death, and so I'm not saying that that's some unique thing to me. And even my stories of sex and violence aren't even that unique. They're not extreme. If anything, they're slightly funny, slightly sad, slightly humbling. I will say this was the easiest book to write that I've ever done because it was just me kind of stream of consciousness stuff that I've been through. It's been the hardest to read because I can't believe I was such a piece of shit back then. And when I say a piece of shit, I mean like what a wimp I used to be. What an absolute. I'm recovering beta male. Not saying that I'm something awesome now, but Jesus Christ, when I read my own stuff, I'm like, I should have been beaten up more. But it's all true. I don't lie. I'm very honest about things I've been through, and clearly my social failings, my lack of socialization. And also in a weird way, it's a tribute to the great weirdos that I've surrounded myself with and have grown up with, and wanted to get their story out. And being as delicate as possible, not really giving out anyone's names, but if you know my close circle of friends, I think it's pretty obvious who's who. But yeah, if I was going to sum up the book, it's a random assortment of my experiences. I think of myself as a radically normal guy, a radical normie, in the sense that like there's nothing unique or special about me. There's nothing unique or special about my history. But in the world of writing and fiction and storytelling as it is now, because everyone's so focused on like, oh, I'm this, I'm that, I'm traumatized, I'm a pansexual liberationist, whatever. I think it's unique that you have a radically normal guy writing a book. I mean, that's the way I approached it. I guarantee you most people aren't going to read it that way, just because what I conceive of as normal often isn't.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the book quite thoroughly, but I read some of the stuff you went through, stuff you had done and stuff you had witnessed, and was like, I don't know. I mean, you had
going into it.
No, I enjoyed it. It's just like, I must have been a real fucking square when I was a kid, because like I never did anything like that. And I mean, what the stuff you're describing in your book is not too outlandish, but
no, not at all.
But it's like, wow.
I was also a late bloomer, to be honest with you. So just a little biographical information. I mean, it's obviously in the book, but I grew up in Morgantown, West Virginia, which is a college town, party town. So everybody I knew growing up were into at least alcohol, later drugs, marijuana than cocaine, whatever. But everyone was into alcohol really like early, like at 15, 16, just because it was so available and it was so normal. Because not only is it a college town, but it's a party school. It has a reputation for a big party school, and I really resisted that for a lot of years. The two main reasons I don't really talk about in the book, but I had an uncle who was a total drunk. He divorced my aunt, and I just had bad experience with him. I literally had to pull him out of a campfire one time because he was so blotto that we were out fishing, and he just like, hey, let me tell you something. He leans over and he falls into the face first into the campfire, and I was like 11. I had to pull him out. And then my dad, he wasn't a drunk, but my dad would drink more than he should, and I didn't like it. So I resisted for a really long time, which was fine until I started like the resistance broke when I turned 18, 19. And then I just went batshit crazy because I had been denied, and all of a sudden this whole new world opens up. But yeah, I never went.
Ooh, sex. I must have all the sex.
Oh, I was. That's funny too, because I was so into booze when I first did it because I've been personally denying myself for so long, and then all of a sudden I became like a booze hound, and I became a sex hound too. Like I wanted it because I didn't have it. I was a late bloomer in that regard too. And then it's hilarious. Like once I started down this journey, then I met people who were kind of on the extreme end of it. And one of the later chapters, you meet my former roommate, who I'm still close with to this day. And he was the guy that turned me on to, okay, maybe, sex addiction is an actual thing and it's ugly, but it's also hilarious. Just the sex addiction where you're losing friends or you're losing wife or girlfriends, which unfortunately eventually did happen to him. But when we were living together, his sex addiction was just constant masturbation and constant pornography, which led to some very humorous episodes, which finds their way into one of my later chapters called Ocelot Days. And I'll leave it to your imagination of why we called my friend Ocelot.
Yeah, it was something that I had my head scratching up until I actually read the chapter myself.
Yeah.
That chapter, I mean, I don't want to go into particulars of it. Buy the goddamn book.
Better.
You better buy the book. And by the way, I have the cover art up on screen now. The beautiful cover art by Matt Lawrence, our art director. If you want to, I mean, how could you not want to buy a book like that? It's goofy Dracula holding up a pair of panties,
big panties too. Yeah, which is very apropos.
Yeah. This is it's thematically related because one of the chapters you actually go into a trip you took to Romania
Romania, yeah. And I don't know if I mentioned the castle, but the sexcapades in Romania happened in Bran Castle, which is a total tourist trap where they talk about how like, oh, that's the real Dracula's castle, and it's not, but it just looks creepy.
There was no real Dracula, right? I mean,
there was a family, Dracula. Vlad Tepes was a real prince of Wallachia. His last name was Dracula, but it was sort of a title last name because his father was Dracul, and Dracula is son of Dracul. He's a real guy, and he really did have a castle, but the real castle he had is destroyed because it was on top of a mountain, and that part of Romania where it's built has lots of earthquakes. So I've been to that one, Poianari. It's really nothing because, like I said, it's just ruins. But Bran Castle, which was built by like a member of the Habsburg family many years later, it's just really eye-catching, and it's kind of cool in that gothic way. And in general, I think they pitch it as Dracula's castle because A, it sounds cool, and B, because I think they read in Jonathan Harker's journal and the Borgo Pass that he talks about, they think it was in the general area of where that castle was built. So it's just a confluence of different tourist traps kind of coming together.
Yeah, I mean, Romania is one of the few countries in Europe I haven't been to, but I imagine it's a big earner for the economy there. I mean, the way you described all the touristy things going on in this town was hilarious to me.
Oh, it's vampire kitsch everywhere, especially in Transylvania, obviously. Yeah, there's always stores selling something Dracula related. There's always people dressed up in costumes pretending to be Count Dracula. And of course, when you go somewhere that has a legitimate connection to the historical Dracula, it's even more outlandish. Like, okay, Siggy Schwar was the town where he was born in. There's like Dracula themed wine bar, and then his old capital was a place called Targovishta, and they have a bust of Dracula. I mean, the only interesting thing, the kitsch thing never appealed to me. So when I was on the trip, I was with people who like they wanted to do the kitschiest, ugly American stuff, and I didn't. That didn't interest me. But what did interest me was, I mean, the Romanians do think of him as a national hero, and there is a deep love of him. But it feels like they've just given up on like actually trying to teach people like, oh, this is why we revere him as a good person. It's like, oh no, he's the vampire guy. And yeah, they do it because it makes money. That's the only reason people go to Romania. Although it's really pretty. I really like Transylvania a lot. Wallachia, which is the southeastern portion, was kind of boring and kind of flat, but Transylvania was gorgeous. The scene of the place of interethnic conflict, which I learned firsthand in that bar scene between Hungarians and Romanians, which is still, I guess, a touchy subject, or it was when I was there because I think it was an election year.
It's always touchy. I mean, the Hungarians, I know they're not. They're still a bit sore over that Treaty of Trianon business, and they don't really care for Romanians. I mean, from their perspective, like losing Transylvania to Romania would be like if the U.S. fought a war with Mexico, lost, and had to give back California and Texas.
Right. Yeah. Or I think an even better example is Serbia and Kosovo. Kosovo it's been majority Albanian for a really long time, but that's the emotional and propaganda homeland of the Serbs because of the Battle of Kosovo, where they lost to the Ottomans, and some of their oldest churches are there. The Hungarians had the same relationship with Transylvania. When it was the Kingdom of Hungary, a lot of their capitals were in Transylvania, like the great kings Matthias Corvinus, whose castle I went to, Hunador, which is in Transylvania. Actually, that's John Hunyadi's castle. He's like a famous Hungarian warlord. So yeah, it was a big deal for them, and it's interesting. They seem a lot more upset at the loss of Transylvania than they do the other parts of the old Kingdom of Hungary, like Slovakia or coastal Croatia. They don't seem to really gripe about that as much. But I think just because of the historical significance of Transylvania to them as people.
Yeah, you don't see too many Hungarians lamenting the loss of Transcarpathia. Well, I've been there. It's not. It's really not that great real estate. It's very pretty, but I was there about 3 years ago. I was passing through from Lviv to back to Budapest, and I was in this city called New Kakovo, which is just like that would be like, I guess, the Ukrainian equivalent of West Virginia. It's very run down, very industrial. They've got I don't know. It's very poverty ridden. The main attraction of that city is an old Hungarian castle that was built in the 1300s, which was a neat a neat thing to see. But you go there, and like large portions of the castle are in a state of disrepair because the Ukrainians can't be bothered to like maintain it. The nicest part,
it's a Hungarian castle, right? Who gives a shit?
Yeah. Like they have it open for like the tourists. It costs I think like $1.20 to get in for admission. But the nicest part of it is the part that the Hungarian government paid to restore, like a little exhibit they have. It's also the only part of the museum that's in English.
Oh, convenient.
Yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned that part of the world is sort of like West Virginia. I do think it's not fascinating because it's actually very logical, but when immigrants, at least European immigrants, when they move to America, they always seem to congregate in places that are the most like where they left. Like it makes sense that Scandinavians are all up in the northern Midwest, which the climate is comparable somewhat to Scandinavia. Yeah, and Subcarpathian Ruthenians, I mean, the people from the part of the world you're talking about, there's tons of them in Pittsburgh. I mean, that's what Andy Warhol was, that Pittsburgh, Southwest Pennsylvania, northern West Virginia area. I mean, that's where a lot of them live.
Like how Plains Germans from the north ended up in Wisconsin,
or North Dakota,
and whereas the Bavarians ended up in places like Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and West Virginia has where I'm from, a large Swiss community. Think about it, mountain state, Swiss people. It makes total sense. So yeah, Romania was a trip. I liked it a lot. But compared to other places I went to in Europe around the same time, it was definitely more of a time warp. In the sense that Romania is still relatively poor. I know it might be changing a little bit, but when I was there, it was still not only relatively poor, but it was obviously poorer than any of its neighbors, save Bulgaria. Like all the other countries looked to be doing pretty significantly better. And it was also, I talk about one of the scenes in the book. It was also kind of an eye-opening thing too, because I was still in my sort of, I was never like really liberal, but like kind of a college centrist phase. And then, meeting people with like the whole gypsy/Roma issue. And that like became a topic of discussion. And that was kind of eye-opening to see the fact that they actually live in their own villages and, there's still horse and buggies and they're begging for things everywhere on the streets.
They're still stealing.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see any of it, but I can believe it. There was no middle ground for the way they were treated. Either people in Romania were like super nice to them and, would like pat the kids on the head and give them stuff, or it was just like shoe dog. Like they would just like backhand them. So it was, for an American from West Virginia, which is an incredibly homogenous state, it was kind of new experience. But in general, the thing I always remember about Romania is, of course, my weird sexual adventure. And that's what I talk about in the book.
Yeah. It's
that was an awkward couple of days.
Yeah. I will. We'll refrain from talking about that by the damn book. But yeah, that was interesting for me. From someone who lived in that part of the world for 4 years.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I was going to say there was a weird side note that I didn't add in the book, but I think it's something we could talk about. I was there in like a part of a college trip, and one of the girls I was with, who was very nice but very ugly, we found out later that she was like banging our bus driver the whole time we were there. And this bus driver, we jokingly called him James Bond because he, Romania, like every Eastern European country, doesn't have very wide roads, and he was driving a tour bus, and he did things that I didn't think were possible, like these tight ass medieval roads. And one time I know how he did it because he asked us to move this like Italian car out of the street, and we did. And then we all realized we might go to Romanian jail, but we were okay. But anyway, this girl who was my age, she was banging this guy. He had to be in his 40s or 50s. And yeah, so there was all types of debauchery going on. I just didn't realize it at the time. I learned later. Kind of glad I didn't know, because that
fell for his vampiric accent and his ability to navigate medieval switchbacks.
Well, hey, it's if you're into human sexual development, Romania was eye-opening because all of the Romanian men were pretty like ultra masculine, except for the city guys. Then you got the kind of pseudo Italian, like super tight pants, gelled up hair, club boys, but like. But like everybody else was, gold chains, hairy chest, rough around the edges. And, some of the American women I was on the tour with, they really liked that. Others didn't care for it because they went to the tour as like couples. So they were banging each other anyways. So everybody was having sex apparently on this tour, which I guess is just, it was my first like group trip outside the United States. I guess that's just kind of a rite of passage. I had no idea. It's
like the Gentile version of a birthright taglet trip.
That makes perfect sense to me. But I will say that if this conversation is turning you on, it shouldn't, because none of the people involved, maybe two, were actually attractive. And I include myself in the non-attractive category, just to be fair.
So it was really like a birthright trip.
Kind of, yeah. Although there was zero, none of us had any drop of Romanian blood. I mean, I guess we had an honorary Romanian who happened to be an Italian. But that's about it. Yeah.
So. Yes. Buy the book if you can read it. You'll want to read about this debauchery. To rewind a bit, you kind of, as you said, those are the two predominant themes of the book. One of the more interesting early chapters is called Alan. We can talk about this one a bit more freely because you published it at Terror House a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. So if you are interested in the book and you want to read like some samples of the book, there's a link in the description to the excerpts that are up on the site now. Alan is one of the funnier excerpts. You want to. It focuses on someone, a rather interesting character you knew during your grad school days.
Yeah, not only the most he's the most interesting character I've ever met, barring my old roommate. But he's the most interesting character I've met because that was my first brush with legitimate psychosis. So yeah, Alan, not his real name, but Alan was a guy I went to grad school with. So, I went to grad school up in the University of Vermont. And if you know anything about Vermont, it's completely desolate. And then you get up to Burlington where the school is, and all of a sudden there's this town, very small town. And it's total crunchy granola, lefty, Bernie Sanders, social democrat type of stuff. And I was there during the whole Occupy thing, but that's kind of immaterial. Alan was eye-opening. So Alan was this guy. He was older than most of us. I think when I was in grad school, I was in my middle to late 20s. He was in his early 30s. He was from New York, came from wealth, or at least upper middle class, because the stories he told, like his parents paid him to go to Switzerland at some point, and you could tell that this was a guy that didn't come from anything remotely proletarian. However, I didn't know it until deep into the later years of grad school that he was he had to have been like bipolar, manic depressive. He had a whole bunch of issues, but at first he was your harmless kind of like grad school crank, which most of us were. But what made him weird is that he kind of wore the same clothes every day. His hygiene wasn't great, but he was obsessed with writing. He would tell anyone you talk to that he was going to be a writer.
I'm going to be a writer. I want to be a writer so badly.
I want to be the writer. It was novels, and he would always name drop his favorite writers, which is Philip K. Dick, Don DeLillo, and that type of stuff, right? And every class assignment we would do, he would try and finagle it into writing fiction. Like he never wrote nonfiction, even though this wasn't a Masters of Fine Art program or creative writing, whatever. So he was always doing that, and because academics are cowards and they don't really have standards, they just let him do it. But the thing is, they let him do it, but he never wrote anything. So he was always bragging about being a writer, but I never saw him write a word. The only time I would interact with him would be in his office because he was really into jazz. And he would talk about all the writing ideas he had and all these great plans, but he never did anything. Definitely lazy. But then I realized when I started noticing things that were off about him. I mean, he was always eccentric. Then he starts missing his class. So we were all on teaching stipends, and he started not teaching his class, and I would fill in because I was Mr. punctual, do your right job. I note in the story that I was literally, it wasn't a joke, but people would call me Mussolini, or they would just call me straight up fascist. And one of the things when I was like, why are you guys calling me that? They're just like, well, you shine your shoes. Like only Mussolini would do that, which to me was like, I didn't get that. Like, but I would wear a tie in class.
Oh, you're a fascist because you like to,
yeah,
cut a good image.
Exactly. Or I would wear a tie to class because I didn't want to look like a schlub. Because most of the guys I taught with, they just literally wore t-shirts and jeans, and I just thought like, you don't have to be a crazy right-wing radical to disrespect people who look like that. Anyway, so Alan starts missing his classes. I start covering it, and I noticed with the way the students were looking at me, they had this weird mixture of like antipathy, like they just really hated being there, or weird like deer in the headlights look. And I started asking them, I was like, okay, what does he have you guys do? And they're like, well, we usually just sit and read. Like he opens up whatever book he wants, we open whatever book we run, and we just read silently to ourselves for an hour and 10 minutes. And I was like, are you serious? And yeah, so then I started noticing that his he didn't come to class as much. He didn't come to the building as much. And then one night, and I should tell you right now that my grad school years were awful for many reasons. But the first year was really bad. I lived in this shitty apartment in the bad section of town, which is hilarious because Vermont's like so safe. But relatively speaking, bad part of town was all because of drugs and as well as some lack of assimilation issues among the Somali and
I know the area you're talking about.
Yeah,
I used to live up there.
Yeah, you lived in Plattsburgh, right?
That's where I went to college. I did live in Burlington for a short time though, but
so you know where I'm at. I was in North Street, which again, if you're from Cleveland or if you're from Minneapolis, it's not bad at all. But by Vermont standards, it's dicey. So I lived there. The apartment sucked. My landlord was a sweet old woman, but she was like clearly on the downside of her life and really was never there. The place was a complete dump. I didn't have electricity for a long time. So I would just spend my nights in my office all the time. Eat just shit food and just stay up there and work. And that's why I always got stuff done early. Well, one night, Alan was there, and I just go out in the hallway, and I was like talking to him, and no exaggeration, he just stared at me, and was going, and I couldn't get anything out of him. And that's when I found out through a third party that he was taking lithium. Like he was hardcore.
Holy shit.
Yeah, he was hardcore on lithium. So he was like drooling. He had drool stains on his shirt. He was a mess. And that's when I knew, like, okay, I don't think this guy is going to last in the department. So soon enough, we all graduate and we don't see him. It's just like he becomes a ghost all of a sudden. Next thing you know, he contacts me out of the blue. Instead of being like lithium depressed, he's manic. He's grown this weird ratty beard. I meet him at this like pretentious coffee shop that tries to be like Weimar, Germany, whatever. And he's there and he's talking to me about how Osama bin Laden is actually Jesus Christ and how Obama had put something in his brain and about how he was being spied upon by his father who was hiring assassins to track him from New York to Burlington. And it was just complete nuttiness. And I actually met him in this state multiple times. First of all, because I'm like, this poor bastard only has one friend. That's me. And we don't really hang out that. So I was trying to keep tabs on him and I would buy him, dinner and lunch and whatever, because he looked like a mess. But then when he started getting really, really, really deep down to sort of when he's just rambling, dropping racial slurs loudly and in the bar, just some of those, but not most of it was nonsensical. Like I didn't understand what he was saying. So that's when I told my girlfriend at the time is, please, for the love of God, don't let me go meet that guy again because he seems potentially dangerous.
He asked me to edit his 100-page letter to the government on how the FBI was firing microwaves into his brain at night.
Well, he did eventually send me a short story and he wanted me to look over it. And I was so afraid. I don't think I even bothered to open the Word document. I'm like, oh, this is going to be some weird like Art Bell on crack. Like I don't really want to know what this is about. But my fear that he was potentially dangerous proved to be right because eventually he was court ordered into a psych ward at the university hospital because his neighbor, which was a female, he accused her of stalking him, being a member of the CIA. Apparently he beat the bejesus out of her, like punched her in the head, and her boyfriend got involved, and the court basically sent him to the funny farm up in the top floor of this university hospital.
So we're talking like a total Terry Davis, glow in the dark breakdown.
Oh God, yeah. They literally glow in the dark. Yeah, total mind meltdown, total meltdown. And so he emails me again and says, "Hey, you want to come meet me in the hospital?" And again, as a writer, and I would never I'm a writer, but I was like, this is an experience I can't turn down. And it was the creepiest thing I've ever experienced. It's isolated wing because they were all like violent, which is what they told me. I got patted down.
It was real like Silence of the Lambs hours.
Absolutely. And when I knew it was bad is when I noticed all of them were wearing like remember it was really popular, at least when late 90s, early 2000s, when people play basketball, they always wore the sweatbands or sweat on their wrists or on their arms. They were all wearing those on their wrists, and I was like, oh, that's to stop them from cutting themselves. Yeah, none of them were wearing belts. They're all wearing loose fitting clothes. The nurses there were all these big, huge African dudes. It's like, oh, this is, legitimate. And the way they were sitting around the TV is like they're kept far enough away that if like one of them had the gall to change the channel, that they could be broken. The fight could be broken up. And Anthony was just, his real name, Alan, I should say. Anthony was his last name. Alan.
I don't think anyone's going to find him.
No, you won't, because I recently looked him up on Twitter, and it's hilarious. If after this I'd show you his real name, some of the stuff he wrote on Twitter is like, I'm the real Osama bin Laden. Come find me, just incredible. And like I said in the story, I would believe that he's probably dead. Like I don't think he's alive anymore, or if he's not alive anymore, he's in jail. Yeah, so I go and meet him in this funny farm, and just this air of menace. Like everybody's looking at me because I'm this intruder. I had this bad vibe, and the first thing Alan says to me is like, "It's like these motherfuckers keep stealing my magazines." So he's accusing all of his guys. And he has a room by himself, but somebody was still mad that people were stealing his New Yorker magazines. And to top it off, the hilarity of the fact was, I don't know if I put this in the story because I wrote that one like in a fever dream because I was like, I got to get this out. This is one of the weirdest things that ever happened to me. But he was so mad that they kept stealing his magazines. But then he looked at me and goes, well, the New Yorker's gotten too liberal anyways. And I actually laughed out loud. I'm like, a bohemian, bipolar guy who loves jazz, who you would have pegged as like a total left-wing guy, is complaining about how the New Yorker is too liberal. Like, this is wild.
Well, maybe he meant in the communist sense, like,
No way. I think but I don't think he meant it in like the conservative sense either. He meant it in like, we're not thinking of a rational person, but the way he said it reminded me of like my grandparents, the constant Fox News watchers. So I just laughed because I wouldn't expect that. He might have also been trying to appeal to me, to be honest with you.
So he wasn't trying to make an argument that social democracy is social fascism.
No, I don't. He wasn't. The one thing about him is he looked like the stereotypical Antifa type. He wasn't political at all. He never talked about politics. But when he did, it was complete out of his mind wacko. Osama bin Laden is Jesus, stuff like that. The other thing I will notice, I forgot, he was really into Buddhism. He thought of himself as like a serious practitioner, and then he went nuts. And Lord knows what he did. And last time I talked to him, he wanted me to co-sign a lease with him because he'd just gotten kicked out for refusing to pay the rent in his old apartment, and it was apparently threatening his landlord, like he was going to blow him up and stuff. And yeah, it's just a weird guy. And if nothing else, that story is, I think, a good crystallization of the types that you meet in useless majors in grad school, like people who are just going nowhere fast. And
more money than brains.
More money than brains. Yeah, pretty much everyone I was in the program with was wealthy. They came from different parts of the world and different parts of the United States, but yeah, all of them were at least upper middle class for sure. I was the one that at least made me somewhat unique, that I didn't come from that same sort of background.
Out of curiosity, you don't go over this in the book or in the story, but like, how did you end up in that environment? What made you want to pursue grad school?
Oh God. So I did really well in undergrad. And a lot of people were telling me like, oh, you should pursue a career in academia, because I had won a couple like pointless awards for different things that I've done. I was originally an English major just because I was always a total book dork. I was really into books. And I finished it in 3 years. And I was like, oh, do I graduate early? And they're like, no, why don't you do a second major? So I did the history major in like a year and a half. And I did another minor. So people were basically encouraging me like, oh, you should do this, you should do this. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. And then I just kind of got lazy and didn't apply. And then I did a complete 180 and joined the military after college. And then the opportunity to go to grad school popped up, and I was either going to go to Florida or UVM, and UVM was going to pay me more. So that's why I stayed there. And I just it was an interesting experience, that's for sure. I'm glad I did it because, I one of my first books I ever wrote, which I think I should just republish at this point because no one bought it. And I actually think the argument's pretty good, but that produced there. It was a good experience, but personally it was, I was homeless at one point up there, just not good. Definitely.
You mentioned that briefly in Alan. It sounded unpleasant.
It was not pleasant. I was well below the poverty line at one point. The girl I was seeing with up there, she and I had we stayed together, but like the first couple months were extremely rough for different reasons. The main reason was the fact that she got accused of plagiarism, and they were threatening to kick her out of the program, but they decided on that they let her stay, but they wouldn't let her have her stipend anymore. So she was like, she couldn't stay. And she didn't want to tell her parents because she claimed her father was abusive. And so guess whose back she had to jump on in order to pay for her last year of college. And that was me. I was also the guy that wrote her thesis 3 times. Yeah. So she actually did plagiarize near the end. She didn't. The first time was bullshit. It was an inner office cat fight between her and this gay guy who was always out to get people. He, looking back now, this was a little bit before like we started using terms like social justice warrior and all that stuff. Looking back now, that's exactly what this guy was. Because I remember he got mad at me because I said I liked All in the Family. Like I thought that was a funny show, and he was like, "How could you like that?" Blah blah blah. And he was rattling off, and he didn't understand the fact that Archie Bunker as a character was supposed to be lampooned, but the thing is, people loved him so much that the whole point didn't work. Anyway, so it was clearly he was just out to get It was also like an inner minority thing. It was so weird. I learned like so late in the game, and I was so mad at everybody else because they kind of went along with it and didn't stop. And the accusation was complete bullshit. What it was is there was a class handout that we're going to grade it. No one was getting graded on. It's just like a little handout thing. Like, I'm going to talk about this today. And she used Wikipedia without citing it. That's all. That's all it was. But they literally almost kicked her out of the program because of that. And the irony, of course, like I said, is when she got to her thesis stage, she legitimately plagiarized in the fact that she had me write it 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was some bad mistake. That's why I say I'm a recovering beta. The shit I did back then, I would never do again in a million years.
I mean, I would have at least charged her for it. But then
I should have. I got nothing. Only thing I got out of it was a 5 years of a relationship that ended on a fairly sour note too.
Yeah, you mentioned that later in the book.
Yeah. She's married now to a doctor, by the way.
Of
Good
course.
Good for her. Yeah.
And these types always manage to land on their feet. But yeah, speaking of that, one of the other chapters in the book, Memoirs of an Execution. That's an interesting one, and it's also one we can talk about further because it's also on the site. You want to go over that one? That one's interesting. You talk about your history as a metalhead.
Yeah, well, I'm still a metalhead. And when I tell people that, they don't understand because just the way I look. I don't look like a metalhead. I wear like collared shirts and stuff. But
You bathe.
I bathe. I don't have long hair. I think beards and mustaches are gross. So I've never had facial hair. No offense. It just doesn't look good on me. So I was really into metal, and living up in Burlington, it was surprisingly awesome to be a metalhead because Burlington is, the first major, but one of the first stops most metal bands would go to if they're either about to start a Canadian tour because it's right on the border, or when they're coming back from a Canadian tour and going to do like a U.S. leg. So huge bands came through. I'm about to name drop some bands. Most people, unless you're into metal, you might not know the bands, but I saw Gorguts, Every Time I Die, Terror. Oh God, who did the album? Death Heaven. Sabaton, The Sword, Clutch. Oh, there's so many more. But the band I talk about in that piece was Napalm Death, who, they've been around forever, since the 80s, one of the founders of sort of grindcore, this really super aggressive and abrasive type of heavy metal. And they're like anarcho-communists, especially the lead singer, Barney Greenway. That's obvious what they are. They're vegan. All their songs are about how corporate power is evil and capitalism is evil. And when the night I saw them was the day that Lee Rigby, the British soldier who was beheaded by 2 jihadists in London, like that was the night I saw them. Basically, not to give it away, but we would use the term cucked, I guess, but like somebody in the crowd cucked Napalm Death, and it was so bewildering to watch. Because it definitely peeled back some of my misconceptions. Like I always thought of, because metal is very masculine music. There's no getting around that. Like one of the reasons I got into metal is because it was so aggressive and it spoke to the sort of the anger issues that I had as a younger guy, which I also talk about. And of course, even today when I'm lifting weights or doing anything physical, if I'm in the gym, I can't listen to anything but metal because everything else seems so weak in comparison. But that show made me realize that most people who play metal are
pussies.
They're total pussies. They're like crunchy. I mean, the one exception were the black metal guys, and they turned out to be fucking psychopaths. They started murdering people. So there's no nice medium, at least that I've seen.
Yeah, I mean they live the meme at least. I mean that's how I feel about punk. I wasn't a huge punk guy, but it is hilarious about like all these, because punk was a very at least when it started out was a very masculine genre like metal was, and all the punks rockers that are still around are absolute fucking pussies. I saw this like a couple weeks ago. It was like some punk account on Twitter is like, our punk family is getting vaxxed. We're all getting the vaccine.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So we can go back to and it's pictures of like Jello Biafra
got. God, don't
he got fucking vaccinated. All these guys got vaccinated. I just can't help but think of just that's like the Rage Against the Machine song. Fuck yeah, I'll do what you tell me. Fuck yeah, I'll do what you tell me. They're all absolute fucking pussies. So
I'm an idiot because my blinders with metal. It shouldn't have surprised me because I had this same response because I grew up as a punk rock fan first. Like I loved the Ramones. Johnny Ramone was legitimate punk, right? Because he was like the kind of conservative Reaganite who was pissing off his own bandmates. But yeah, I loved the Ramones, Sex Pistols, the Clash, and then I got really heavy into the Misfits, who I still love. But I had that exact same experience with the punks, the kids I went to high school with. It's like they looked different, they pretended to be different, but in actuality, they were like toadies. They were the kids who were always nice to the teacher. They were the kids who were always like, "Can we have more homework, please?" Like
apple polishers.
100%. That was my experience. And then when I looked in the background, a lot of punk rock musicians, it's like Jello Biafra's parents were like social workers. And, you know, so many of them come from that like that smug liberal coastal elite class.
Well, it explains how they were able to pay the bills despite supposedly living in poverty and having difficulty selling records.
Right. And the other thing that my flirtation with punk was also somewhat limited. I was really into it in like early teens because I thought it was rebellious. But then I got really into hardcore. And I still dig a lot of hardcore. The big difference for me was punk at the end of the day, it celebrates ugliness. It celebrates, you know, it's Lou Reed talking about heroin. It's, you know, gutter, shitty streets. Kind of that's the aesthetic.
I wouldn't call Lou Reed punk, but I get what you're saying.
Right. Yeah, but he lays the blueprint of what punks are trying to do, like the street poet Bukowski type of crap. Hardcore was a little bit more positive it was more self-affirming. It was about like gaining strength. It was about, you know, being aggressive and, you know, standing up for yourself. And I just liked that better. I thought that was a better message and I appealed to it better. And also I liked it better because it was more aggressive. Like for me, it was always this path to finding something more bombastic, more aggressive, more masculine. And compared to punk, hardcore is like, it is that. It is more masculine. It is more testosterone fueled. And in some ways, it's even more testosterone fueled than metal because metal, you get that whole virtuoso thing and kind of nerdy guys trying to like shred like and like trying to, you know, appeal. Whereas hardcore usually is just kind of like Cro-Magnon's simple songs about, you know, not about dragons or, you know,
yeah, like
demons.
you know, like metalheads are trying to hit the high notes when they're singing and stuff like that.
But even
banging on their instruments and just banging on the instruments like.
But even death metal with the growling. Like the lyrical content is usually like a zombie movie come to life. It's kind of cartoonish. And then the more realistic edge of black metal is like suicidally depressive. So hardcore, like when you look at the lyrics, is usually more like, you know, I will be heard. I'm going to persevere. No one's going to drag me down. Put more weight on my shoulders. I can take it. Like it's more kind of macho, and that appealed to me, which is hilarious using the term macho because if you read this book, at least this is my perception of this book. I really don't come across as you know, anything cool or something to be modeled after in this book. And like I said, when I read it back again, I was like, oh my God, I couldn't stop wincing. It was physically painful. It's like, oh Jesus, I really was that guy.
Well, I mean, that's how you know you've got a good book. I mean,
yeah,
it's definitely in that vein of like Selenian creative confessions, where you're, you know, just laying out all the bad parts of yourself for comedy.
Yeah, well, I do want people, first of all, buy the damn book, but the other thing too is like, I really, you know, even some of the more, I wouldn't say tragic, some of the more darker passages, especially early on the first chapter or the second chapter. This is still at its core of me making fun of myself and making fun of the people I've grown up with. Like, I forget what chapter it is now, but you know, one of my friends, SK, you know, we joked that he had fetal alcohol syndrome, and the stuff he would say, like, he told a woman just out of the blue one time that she had a fat vagina while her husband was standing next to him. Like, that's hilarious to me. We were literally playing beer pong, and we said to SK, we said, hey, distract them so they miss. And he just blurts out, you have a fat vagina, as this woman's like trying to shoot. And her husband, thank God the husband starts doubling over in laughter because that could have been nasty. But even he has a dark edge. Like he would threaten girls constantly. But yeah, the point of the book is kind of a humorous take at my life and myself. Now, Ralph Monday, who wrote a great blurb, he understands this book in a way that boggles my mind, in the sense that, like, I was not my intention to write some sort of weird millennial testimony, but I guess that is one way it could be read. So I would be interested to see how people take this.
Well, I mean, that whole death of the author type deals, with things like this. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
personally just read it as kind of like a funny memoir,
Oh
just
yeah,
snippets of life like that.
that's the point of it. It's just a goofball memoir to talk with some added like tragedy thrown in there. But I've talked to Ralph offline about it, and he sees the story as sort of an encapsulation of millennial kind of nihilism that the millennial generation, which I belong to, and I think you belong to as well, it had no opportunity to go anywhere, and it's still not going anywhere. The no past to really latch onto, no future to look forward to. So we just kind of, give in to primitive urges, or at least I did at the time, especially in my college years. Like, all I wanted to do was drink and have sex, and not to spoil anything, but I did a lot more of the other. I did a lot more of one than the other, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see where Ralph was coming from with his interpretation of it. I mean, but I kind of looked at the book and just the whole thing in general as just. This is how life is. It's just a funny look at like the two polars of the. I mean, I put this in the. You kind of couldn't avoid. I couldn't avoid kind of putting this in the back blurb. It's like, but it's something that a English teacher said to me back in high school. Literature tends to revolve around two subjects: sex and death. And your book, obviously goes to the poles of both.
Yeah.
Bringing comedy and some tragedy out of both.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things. When I started writing it, it was unintentional. Like, I just actually sat down to write a memoir, and it just seems like everything that's ever happened to me that's interesting seems to involve either somebody dying, someone getting really hurt, or someone boning somebody, or somebody's thinking about boning someone. So the Ocelot Days chapter is essentially my first meeting with the world's most sex obsessed person, and the gloriousness that came with that. And other, like SK, the guy I talked about, you have a fat vagina. He was also obsessed with sex to the point where the FBI eventually got involved in that guy because he was stalking. Yeah, he was stalking his ex. So what happened?
When cooming has consequences.
Cooming does have consequences. So the two big coomers in the story are the guys SK and T. So the FBI got involved with SK because SK. All right, so he came from a wealthy family. You would know it because he refused to wear shirts with sleeves. Like, I've never seen this guy wear a shirt with sleeves. It was always a sleeveless shirt. Total, like, whatever your stereotypical redneck is, he would be that guy. But his family was really prominent in the town, and his grandfather had tons of money. So when his grandfather died, he left him like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And SK blew through this shit in less than a year. Why did he buy it on? He bought a new TV. He bought a Ford F-150 and then, Pimp My Ride tricked it out by putting, TVs in the headrest. But the thing that really lost his money on is he fell. I'm going to start laughing because of how stupid this is. He fell in love with a stripper. He fell in love with a stripper from Maine. So he would drive from West Virginia to Maine to visit this girl's family, or he would drive her from West Virginia to New York City. He took her to New York City to watch the ball drop on New Year's Eve. Of course, she's just milking him for his money. So when they break up because she starts seeing her old boyfriend, he becomes a stalker and he starts threatening her on Twitter. He starts threatening her online. And we all got a call from the FBI at one point because he managed, because he's a brain surgeon, and managed in the same tweet that he was threatening his girlfriend that he also threatened President Obama. He was like, after I get done beating the shit out of my girlfriend, I'm going to kill you, Obama. Or he said, like, kill you, Obama, or something.
Whatever. By the way, I disavow. That is a quote.
Yeah, it's quote. Please do not isolate that vocal track. Also, nothing. But anyway, but we all got calls from the FBI like, excuse me, do you believe that this person could, and I couldn't keep a straight face. I'm like, dude, this guy, he's a janitor. He lives in a small, apartment, which he eventually got kicked out of because he was stalking one of his neighbors. Like, he would just show up at their other apartment, like random. He's a sex pest. I mean, that's a British terminology, but he's a total sex pest. I don't know. I think he's married now, actually, but good luck. So he was totally sex obsessed. T was less aggressive about his sex obsession, but it was like pathetic. Like, I talk in the book about, I would catch him jerking off constantly. Like, I would just knock on his door and be like, hey, you want some coffee? And he's just like going to town. And I talk about how what made it even better was the fact that he always slept in leopard skin sheets. So the sleaze factor was off the charts. And he was a complete drunk. Like he would throw up in his room and just not clean it for a couple of days. He was a complete.
Like the only thing missing was like the porn music playing in the background.
I know.
Wow.
Oh, he was just. I remember one time we had a house party and he was going around to all the guys at the house party showing them his favorite porn. Like he's like, he was like, I found this new starlet. I want to share it with you. And we went along with it.
Normal behavior.
Yeah, like literally a bunch of dudes at a party drinking beer, and he's showing like some girl getting bukkakied, and we didn't think that was weird at the time, but looking back, good Lord, was it weird?
It reminds me, like there was a kid I knew in junior high who, he had like a floppy disk, and he was showing everyone, hey, I found these naked pictures of Britney Spears online.
Oh, we all knew that guy.
Yeah, and they were obvious photoshops. But it's like
right.
he got someone blew him into the administration for that. Not because we were. I mean, I went to a Catholic school. You weren't exactly poots, but it's like no one wanted to see that shit.
Yeah, that reminds me.
7:30. It's 7:30 in the morning. Yeah, so let's go look at nudes with this fucking weirdo.
The nude trade. Like we used to trade when I was in like middle school, like 8th grade. There's this one kid whose wealthy family would like he would steal his dad's Playboys, and we would like trade him in the bathroom. Like, oh, I'll give you this and this and that because he's a fat kid, so we could just bribe him with food and stuff. And we basically passed around like a mixtape. That thing was stuck together like at the end of it, but yeah, I mean,
it was so stuck together you could use it to club someone to death.
Absolutely, but we all knew kids like that growing up. I mean, even I got caught one time. So when I when I was growing up with a single parent, I didn't have internet in my house. So as soon as I would go to someone's house who did, what do you think the first thing I looked at was when I was 15, 16? So when it dawned on me, like foreshadowing, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should print this out so I can have it and not have to like risk it. Like I would wake myself up at like 3 a.m. and creep into like my friend's room. And this is back when the internet would make that noise. And I would have to like try to be sneaky and like look at porn. And eventually I was like, you know what? I should print some of these pictures out so I can I don't have to constantly do it. Well, I wasn't as sneaky as I thought one night. And I start printing. And I can hear other people stirring in the house, so I had to like cancel it. But the picture is already like half printed by that point, to the point where you can clearly see it's a naked woman. So the next morning, the guy's dad is like, Ben, is this yours? And it's like a topless woman, and so I had to be like, that's research for my myth and legends class. It was the worst. It was the worst, and they knew.
It's my sex ed homework.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned this book, but I had sex ed in 5th grade. Which, the older I get, the angrier I get about that. Like, why were we having sex ed in 5th grade? But anyway, yeah, I totally got caught. Got caught big time.
That must have been mortifying.
It was, especially because this was a family relative. This was my cousin, so I guess I made it a little less worse because they're not going to shame a family member. But I became the butt of jokes for years because of that, because I got caught for years. I also remember one time my cousin sitting me down and be like, Ben, I hope you're not like, he didn't say the words, but he's like, I hope you're not masturbating at the house. I'm like, no. Because he's like, my mom, and like, okay.
Beat off Ben is here.
Yeah. My mom's worrying about you. She thinks you're
beaten Ben.
Ben is beaten, red-glanded Ben. Yeah, so that was awkward. But I didn't have internet. What was I gonna do?
Yeah, I guess I was a bit more fortunate in this regard. My parents had CompuServe from an early age, and then AOL. We got a Windows, and I managed to guess the password because the password was password because my parents being boomers. So that ended with me, sneaking down at like 6 a.m. on a Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I would punch in is Playboy.com.
There you go. It was the exact same thing, buddy.
Yeah, I never got caught because I was smart enough to erase the history afterwards. Well, I think maybe it did it automatically. I don't recall, but I never got caught.
I would say you and I are united in the sense that when we were trying to be sneaky, I don't know about you, but I never was brave enough to do hardcore. I was always soft hardcore. That's what I always got caught with, like Playboy.
Well, I actually did look for hardcore. The problem was like, back in those days, like you would look up like for hardcore porn and like the sites would just send you in a redirect loop. Like you get like one 10-second clip and then you go, oh, see more of this site. And then it's just more 10-second clips of the same shit. And they would just send you around in a circle and you never would actually get what you were looking for.
Right. Well, here's a little factoid for the kids out there, although we're still young men. I don't know if you agree with me, Matt, but it's weird. Like, porn is so prevalent now, especially like OnlyFans. But there was a time, I feel like in the late 90s, early 2000s, when porn was actually very mainstream because like Jenna Jameson was on TV shows. Like the Jerry Springer was always talking about porn stars. You'd have porn stars on TV shows. It was mainstream in a way that feels different than now, simply because there was such a thing as a mainstream. There was such a thing as like a common culture back then. That shit doesn't exist anymore, mainly because of the internet and these weird like fragmentation of culture. But yeah, I felt like, the whole like sex ed comedy kind of loser late 90s, early 2000s, like porn was just kind of a part of that. I don't know if I'm wrong in that regard, but it felt like it was more, it wasn't widely available, but it wasn't as frowned upon. I
think the key difference is that like back then, like, porn stars were stars and stuff.
That's true.
That's stuff. But what's going on now is that it's been democratized. Everyone can be a porn star now.
Decentralization.
It's now just part of the. It's not just cultural white noise. It's something that nobody notices or really thinks is objectionable.
Right. Well, the thing I point out when like I feel like porn kind of mainstreamed is when like Blink-182 put that porn star on the cover of their CD. And like that became part of their image, and they were a huge band for a hot minute. And then I think there was some like the teen comedy movies they would put Jenna Jameson. So I think you're right in the sense like there was. I was thinking
when it got mainstream was when Sasha Grey moved from porn to like legit acting.
See, to me, I feel like that was the end of it. What I keep coming back to is like the late 90s and 2000s, and this is what I tell younger people I know all the time is like, you guys don't understand. When I grew up, there was just this assumption that when you would go further down the line of years, things would get more salacious and people would get more like accepting of crazy stuff. I had no idea we would have this in sort of neo prudish Puritan turn, which I should have expected. But like late 90s TV, early 2000s TV was way raunchier than now. You could get away with a lot more back then. And I think part of that was like risque topics like porn, even pro wrestling was kind of flirting with televised nudity and sex jokes. It was just like raunchy sensationalism was far more acceptable back then. Nowadays, it's weird. Everybody's like glued to porn and OnlyFans, but they'll get the vapors if you say certain words.
Yeah, I mean, even kids shows back then were a lot
South Park
less tame.
I mean, technically it's not a kid show, but like
I was thinking more along the lines of like Ren and Snippy and Modern Life.
Rocco. My God, how many looking back, how many sex jokes were in that show?
Oh God, and just sailed right over the audience's heads.
I'm sure there's like sex jokes in Doug that I never got, but I definitely know in Rock. I mean, wasn't the restaurant he worked out the choking chicken?
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, holy God.
And there was one where I think Heifer was getting milked and it looked like
he's a boy.
Machine.
Yeah.
Like Animaniacs was another one that had like the sex jokes all over the place. I mean, they had a really bad one. There's the episode where they're just like solving the mystery and like like Dot says to Yakko, "I found Prince," and she's holding like Prince the musician, and Yakko says, "No, fingerprints," and then she looks at Prince and she's like, "I don't think so," and throws him out the window.
Wow,
that was bad.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, I think it was just that was the last. I think that was the last gasp of like. Just like sleaze and raunch. Like you got a lot of that in the 80s, and then the 90s was all that turned up to a decimal. And then I just think it just got too loud. And then Janet Jackson showed her boobie on the Super Bowl, and all of a sudden, then it starts being sanitized, which in a way is good, but at the same time, like we've gone overboard with sanitizing certain things. Sanitizing sex off of TV, whatever. I think that's fine. I don't think young kids should be exposed to the sheer amount of pornography that guys of our generation have been exposed to. But like we've become so oppressive about other things to the point where like we're all a bunch of tea kettles about to blow.
It's it's very Demolition Man-esque, in which
That's a good point. Yeah,
in which we're which we're ostensibly more liberated and stuff, but people get the vapors if you say a naughty word,
right. Or have naughty thoughts
or
about.
naughty, it's exactly.
Well, I also think. Did you ever read that book, Sexual Power in Utopia?
Yeah, I read that years ago.
Yeah, well, that book really opened up my eyes to something I assumed to be true, but now I know for it's true. Is that like we all believe that people are having so much more sex nowadays because of just how easy it's gotten, because of Tinder, and it used to be back pages, which I have a funny story about back pages. I can tell you here in a second. But that's not true. A very thin minority of people, your Chads and Stacys, they're having sex like rabbits. Like 99% of everybody else are pretty much incels. They're only like one hug away from being incels because of the sort of the sexual marketplace. That now I know where I live, there's hotter girls. So why settle? Why do I settle when I can do better? And I think that's right. It just makes sense to me that we would live in a culture that has the two extremes of inceldom and like the rare bird who like just can kill it on whatever dating app is popular right now.
Yeah, and this has actually been borne out by scientific studies. I'm sure you've seen like the chart that shows that since 2008, the percentage of men who report not having sex in the past year has gone up immensely, while the women is the rate is still flat. And there was that study that compared Tinder to using the I think it's the Gini coefficient or whatever economic metric they use to measure poverty and inequality. They eventually came up. They ran the numbers on Tinder and realized that if Tinder was like a country, it would be like the most economically unequal country in the world. With
absolutely,
they literally proved the 20-80 ratio. They said something like 15% of like men were getting like 80% of the responses from women.
Absolutely.
On the site.
And the other thing these dating apps have been proven is despite the massive amount of like anti-racism program we've been subjected to, people like they reveal their racial preferences in those dating apps to the point where like I think those dating apps have made statements about that, like, well, we accept everybody, but because like certain populations get matches very easy, whereas others, like I think Asian men get the least amount of matches.
It's Asian men and black women.
Yeah, which is, and also I feel like don't those reveal too that most people still, despite all this, still prefer dating within their own race. I mean,
that same study showed that white women are the most racist when it comes to dating non-whites,
which is hilarious because if you go on Twitter or if you go on any of the alt social media, the depiction you would get of white women is the complete opposite of that.
They're all dating black guys. They're all
exactly.
Oil drillers. Right.
Whereas in reality, it's a weird, man. I resisted that stuff for so long. I really did. That could be another one of the stories of this whole book is Ben's inability to maintain resistance for more than a couple of years, and then he breaks down and does something really stupid. Now the story about the back pages, I don't know if I've told this before on one of the, because we've done this, we've talked to each other like 3 or 4 times.
You've never mentioned it to me.
So I was almost wrangled into clearly an entrapment plot. But so I won't reveal names, but suffice it to say, there are members of my family who aren't dirtbags like me and who have really good jobs. And this person is a lawyer, and his client was a motel owner in a mid-sized city in the Northeast, former industrial place. And this hotel owner was convinced that somebody was living, one of the people who was living year-round the hotel was a prostitute. And not only that, an illegal immigrant prostitute. And he wanted basically proof so he could evict this woman. So my family member came up with the brilliant idea to pose me as a prospective John to go and visit this woman, this lovely Russian woman who advertised herself on back pages, and then proceed to spend the night with this prostitute, although not being serviced, because that would cross some line, I guess, and basically gather evidence. Thank God I didn't do that, because that sounds like the beginning of like Taken. I was going to get beaten, pistol whipped, robbed. But that came very close to fruition. And I was so money broke at that point in my life, I probably would have done it, because he was like, I'll pay you $200 to do this. No.
Yes. Go
sacrifice yourself for And the guy who owns this motel is a complete dirtbag because as soon as I never went to the place, but like I looked it up online, complete rat trap. You can just tell by the outside, like, I'm gonna risk my health for this like total shyster.
Yeah, it's the kind of place, you see the roaches crawling around like when you turn the lights out,
It's a type of place that allows a clear prostitute to live there year round, Like, I still, like, looking back, I'm like, well, what evidence did he need? Like, he was so convinced that she was doing this. And my family member just did a precursory search on back pages and he found her. Well, what else do you need? Like, why was I even about to be set up in the first? Maybe just this is his elaborate plot to whack me, I guess.
Or maybe he had, setting up a camera in there so he could film it because he's a perv.
Yeah, true. It's possible. Candid camera moment.
I mean, thinking about it logically, I mean, why couldn't he? Why, if he didn't want her around, why didn't he just fucking evict her? Just tell her to go find someone else.
Yeah.
I mean, the entrapment thing didn't even seem necessary. Just like, look, I don't want you around anymore.
Like, if she wasn't, I mean, I don't know if she was or not, but if she, in reality, if she wasn't a legal immigrant, what legal recourse would she have had to have fought that?
None.
Exactly. So why? I think it was just a harebrained scheme. Maybe it was an elaborate prank too that I put the kibosh on. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, it never happened. But what if that really did happen and I survived? You can bet your sweet ass that would have wound up in this book, Scattered Scenes of Sex and Violence, because that would have had both at once.
The time I got beaten while pretending to be a John.
Yeah, or they might have it might have been like a McCulture experiment where they just pumped LSD into the room and I, got turned into a killing machine or something.
Got the perv reputation, didn't get the sex.
Yeah, which I don't know if I ever have a perv reputation, but that was definitely my college years. That was sort of the way I felt that, like, Mr. No Sex, who was like, there's a passage, and this is one of the things that makes me like really wince. But I did have a problem at one point in my life. I would get too drunk, and everyone knew that when I would get drunk, I would be willing to drop trowel. So they would always put me with whatever random girl would be at the party, and we would play beer pong. And we had a rule that if you lost and you didn't get a single cup when you got skunked, you had to like run around naked. So they always knew I was reliable to get naked, and the other girl would get naked. And it actually worked a couple times. But yeah, like I had this weird thing where I would get like Pilato and just strip naked. And why did I do that?
Hey everybody, here's my penis.
Yeah, here's I used to joke, but like they would, again, I'm blackout drunk. So I would learn this secondhand or later. They said I would do wrestling poses. I would just like jump on the couch and pretend like I was about to grapple with someone, like to take somebody down and my dick's flopping. Or like I would like do push-ups or tend to be like the ultimate warrior and like push my hands in the air and just everyone's like, why are your balls out? That's just what I did. But I became a hero because any hot girl that would come to these house parties, they knew that they would put her on my team, and if she was a goer, she'd wind up naked. And surprisingly, there was several girls who took me up on it. There was a couple who looked at me like, there's no way in hell I'm doing that. So I was a hero to some of the more sex-starved guys and my friends, including myself.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got a message that my mic disconnected, but it's working now. But yeah, that's
yeah.
It isn't. That was a interesting chapter just from like the perspective of kids are not doing stuff like that these days.
No, God no, because it would get filmed. And I put that in the chapter too. I had that negative experience. Is that when I stopped doing it, thank God I stopped doing it. The reason I stopped doing it is because my first roommate, who was again one of my relatives, he, without me knowing, he was taking pictures of it. And this is also the time when we had disposable cameras. So this idiot took these photos to fucking Walgreens and got them developed. So the person at Walgreens saw my dong. And yeah, so Shirley at Walgreens. And we also lived right next to Walgreens, so they knew me because I would shop there. And then he began distributing these photos to like our friend circle, and there was a couple girls in our friend circle who I was really attracted to, and one of whom, her comment was very derisive about my masculinity, and that was Not cool at all.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was not cool at all. In my defense, this girl was one of those type of white girls that we were talking about earlier, legitimately. So that's how I consoled myself. That and alcohol was how I consoled myself. Oh, God. But yeah, that's when I realized, okay, I got to stop doing this because this is blackmail material. And also, that's a shitty roommate. I don't understand that. You're right that people would never do that now because it's all filmed. That's one place where I feel like a curmudgeon old man. I don't take pictures that often. I don't be like, oh, what a beautiful day to go for a walk. Let me take a photograph of it. Like, I've never thought that way. And the people who are like constantly, like when the riots were happening, the one thing that I focus on is like every single person's got their phone out and are filming license plates or filming everything. It's to me,
man, the city's burning. Time to film it.
Yeah, or like this person's driving through our completely illegal roadblock. Let's just film his license plate. Like, I don't get that.
Twitter, do your thing.
Twitter, do your thing. But like, that's when, that's, I think, one of the reasons why and now it's funny, but when the Edward Snowden stuff first came out, I actually had a very like weak response to that because my opinion, it's still my opinion, although I'm definitely pro Snowden now, but my opinion is we don't even need the government to spy on us. They've like subcontracted each other to spy on us. Like, we're constantly filming each other. We're constantly putting each other on blast. Like, actual government surveillance they don't have to do anything. All they have to do is go. Yeah, they just go online and everybody's filming each other. So I've never understood that. So when my roommate at the time actually took pictures of me doing that, they left a really negative taste in my mouth. And I stopped doing it. I stopped, and him and I eventually kind of grew distant. We grew distant for other reasons. He was a complete pothead. He began selling Adderall out of our apartment without telling me. And I worked nights, so I would come home and just random people would be in our apartment all the time. He was a complete slob. He ate cereal every single day, but would never drain the milk. And he would go weeks without cleaning the dishes. So you'd have curdled milk in the sink. Disgusting. I never forgot one time I went on vacation for a week and left him alone. I come back to the apartment. One of our closet doors had been ripped off, been used as a beer pong table. There was half drunk bottles and red Solo cups of beer on this table. The beer's sticky. The couch that we brought over had blood on it. And then I go into the kitchen. Literally every single bowl, dish, and utensil is in the sink. He didn't bother. It took me 5 hours to clean the whole place. He was a complete and he lost. He had a full ride scholarship and he lost it because he just kept, stopped going to school and smoking weed. So yeah, we had a huge falling out for that for multiple reasons. But I think honestly, what started it was the fact that he basically took pictures of me without my consent. Now, granted, I bear 50% of the responsibility. I shouldn't have been shown my dong constantly, which I also regret.
I mean, it's like the chapter in Matthew Schneider's 6 to 6, where he talks about working a 1 hour photo. We're the only place in Tucson that will develop your homemade pornography.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, imagine being the poor sap who got tasked to, develop those pictures.
And from my limited experiences, the people that make homemade pornography are the same people that go to nude beaches. It's the people you don't want to see doing any of that stuff. It's not the cream of the crop. It's like I think I talked about it on the podcast I do with Bryden. By the way, everyone should watch or listen to Green Grass with Ben Welton and Bryden Proctor every week. But I talked about how, the people when I used to work at a Barnes and Noble, the people who'd come in and would ask for like the porn and risque books, total creeps, dirty old men, fat men, bikers. So these are the type of people who are going to be developing their homemade porno or their nude beach or their homemade nude calendars. This is stuff you don't want to see.
Dudes with fupas.
Oh, and their wives, even bigger ones. Yeah, I mean that's just my experience. So I think for the poor Walgreens developer, maybe me and this young 18-year-old girl that was a treat. She didn't have to look at like 70-year-old West Virginians.
Yeah, it was that was a glorious age for minimum wage workers. No longer have to look at people's dongs anymore.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Also, like my roommate, the balls. Like I never in a million years would have that stuff developed. Never, ever, ever, ever. Even if it was somebody I didn't really particularly like. Like, I can't be like,
well, it'd be
"Hey,
awkward. It'd be awkward just bringing that in. It's like,
exactly. Excuse me. I know you work here and paid here, and you're gonna forget about me the first minute I'm gone. But do you mind looking at these developing these incredibly private, pornographic pictures for me? I'll come pick them up in a couple days, and so exactly who wants these developed.
I need my homemade pornography developed exactly in 1 hour. Can you do that?
Please.
Like it says on the sign.
Yes. Be one of those guys like, I demand this is an hour. This is promise. This is false advertising. I need my pictures of coos and dong within the hour. I'm on my lunch break, by the way.
I have a reservation at the Swingers Club at 8. I need these by 7. I need to get ready.
Oh my God. Swingers clubs, those have to be a nightmare. It has to be a nightmare. Even if you're in like a place that's kind of known for people to be like attractive, like if you live in Miami or like Rio de Janeiro, I guarantee you the swingers clubs there are still nightmares.
Oh, I've never been to one, but I have a friend who was tricked into going one once. Basically, he said like the hottest woman there was a 6, and a lot of
that's hotter than I would assume. I was thinking you're dealing in the land of 4s and 5s.
Yeah. I think. Well, he was also really drunk, so may have been. Yeah. He may have been grading on a curve.
The theme so far of this episode is booze. It seems to be because most of the things I experienced that's talking about in this book, I was either drunk, about to get drunk, or was coming off of a huge bender. Yeah,
I should have titled the show "The Devil's Buttermilk."
That's a good way of thinking it. Yeah, no, it's I also think that's just a theme. If you grow up in a certain part of the world, like if you grow up in working class, blue collar areas, like alcohol is just a part of life. Like in West Virginia, it was just a thing. Like everyone had a drunk dad, or everyone's dad would tailgate. And I know you grew up in upstate New York. I guarantee you probably have similar experience.
Dude, everyone there, fucking in the rural areas at least, drives and drinks.
Yeah. Oh,
when I was hitchhiking, across the country years ago, like tons of dudes would like be drinking in the car, and they'd offer me a beer.
Dude, that's like growing up as a kid. Like the men in my family were like that. They would be like, "I got a Jack and Coke." They'll never know, and just they'd never wear seatbelts, and it's just no one gave a shit. I mean, again, they're from that age of drinking age was 18, and.
It's like I started drinking with my my family was like when I was a teenager. I first smoked pot at a family reunion. I probably shouldn't admit that publicly, but
I have a minor story. Didn't happen to me, but it happened to my first roommate. Again, the things this guy did, I would never do. Apparently, when his family found out that he was a dope head, he was in a jacuzzi at a resort in Maryland, smoking weed with his younger brother, his female and male cousins, and then when his parents caught him smoking weed, they asked if they could smoke weed in the jacuzzi with him, began smoking weed in the jacuzzi with him. Then his grandfather, who had never had weed in his life, was like a World War II vet, was like, "Hey,
I've been hearing about this marijuana cigarette.
Can I have one of them marijuana cigarettes?" And he did, and he joined him in the hot tub smoking weed. And the only person to turn him down was the grandma. So
it wasn't anything like that in my case. Basically, we waited until the adults went to bed, and then my cousin from Philly, broke out the pot.
Cousin from Philly. Somebody's asking if we're a purity house. I don't know how you would get that. I mean, I basically admitted, and I admit in this book, which again by the book, that I am the furthest thing from. I have many. I think Matt and I both have a lot of skeletons in our closet.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm finishing up my poetry volume, which will focus on a lot of that. I mean, I've talked about it on podcasts before. The tentative title was Anchor, but I think a more appropriate title might be Coomer.
Coomer, there you go.
I'm not going with that title because it's just going to get dated, but you can kind of guess where the content of that book is going to go towards.
Well, yeah. It's a fine line because Coomers do deserve to be mocked and lambasted, but from my opinion, a Coomer is somebody who's like a legit porn addict. They think about porn. It's like T in my book. So when I knew T had a legit problem, it was all fun and games to watch him jerk off constantly in the house. But when I saw him try to pick up girls at a bar, by telling this one horrified girl that she looked like a porn star, and then he proceeded,
one of those.
Yeah, and then he proceeded to name the specific porn star. That's when I'm like, okay, this dude has a problem. The fact
Hey, babe, has anyone told you look like Asia Carrera?
That's exactly what he said. And he thought that shit was going to work. Which is just mine, because he's also assuming that this girl was going to know who that was. And here's the sick thing. He told me she did. She actually did. She was like a spot on, and she was hot. But you don't say that. And yeah, so that to me, that's a coomer. Dudes trying to get laid and have a healthy libido, those aren't coomers. Like a guy who I think is the opposite of a coomer, but does talk about, the vag.
Someone who has distorted masturbatory sexuality.
Right. Well, to me, the difference between Real Thomas 77.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, he talks about ladies all the time and getting girls, but I would never in a million years call him a coomer. I think coomer has to be something somewhat pathetic. And Mr. Caligula 138, it did not work. When I tell you, my old man T, when he told this girl who was hot that she looked like, I think it was Asia Akira. It wasn't Asia Carrera. That's a little earlier generation. But he told this girl, you look like Asia Akira. Horrified isn't even the right word. It was disgust. It was revulsion. I've never seen a woman turn so quickly on her heels and walk away without someone legitimately chasing after her. It was as if he just dropped a stink bomb in the bar. And I will add,
she turned around so fast she actually broke a bone.
Yeah, I mean, and keep in mind, one thing about T when I talk about the book, this guy was an expert at ruining the good mood in the bar. He terrorized bartenders he had this website he would go to, was like popular mixed drinks of the 1920s and 1930s. And he would force these 21-year-old, 22-year-old bartenders to be like, hey, can you make me a Singapore Sling? And they would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is Morgantown, West Virginia. We open bottles of Yingling, and we occasionally do a Scotch and soda. That's it. And he would be like, I want you to mix 3 different types of tequila and make it one shot.
I was going to say a Singapore Sling's not that exotic. Wait. Three different types of tequila? That's disgusting.
Okay, so this actually got him banned for this particular bar. He requested Cuervo, Patron, and then some other Rotgut tequila. He shoots it, and the very first thing he does is he goes, and he begins he's about to throw up, and he was literally about to throw up, and we proceeded to then get kicked out. But he would be like, can you make me a royal flush? And they were like, I don't know what that is. And he would show them, and it'd be like 2/3 of vermouth. And they would look at it and be like, we're a place called the Sports Page. What do you think we have vermouth here? Nobody comes to this bar to get gin. This is Budweiser and Bud Light. And he was just,
please give me a shot of Pimm's, please.
Oh my God. And he had this one phase where he was going around smashing, he would take his bottle and hit the top of your bottle. That got us kicked out of the bar a few times. He would hit on the bartenders. This one girl, he was convinced that she was talking about how he was always pro-Israel. He was just a fucking, God love him, but I often joke, he's allergic to good decisions. The man refuses to do any. I mean, he's better now, but back when we were living together, and he was visiting escorts the whole time too. Oof.
Yeah. So basically, basically he had a gigantic wad of cum where part of his brain was supposed to be.
I think in the very first page of that chapter, I said he literally had cum dripping out of his eyes. This is how much that man thought about sex. And I will also add, I forgot the most egregious thing I ever saw him drink. My 20th birthday, he made for himself. This is when I first got into lifting, so I had a bunch of chocolate flavored whey protein powder. He made himself a shot. Prepare yourself. Chocolate protein powder and Jim Beam. Yeah,
I mean, you can't see me, but I went what, and I was silent.
Yeah.
You can't see my face.
Oof.
And how did he not immediately throw that up?
Just I guess certain level. It was early in the night, so he was still rocking and rolling. But I mean, I saw him drink the most god awful. Like he mixed. He at one point he would drink every shot he had to have Goldschlager in it. So he was shooting like Jameson and Goldschlager. Or like he did. I remember one time he did Jägermeister and Goldschlager, and I hate Jägermeister. So I was like, what on God's green earth is making you do this stuff? He did it to make us cringe and like almost throw up, and he was successful a lot of times. That was his.
I fucking hate schnapps. Schnapps give you terrible hangovers, and it's a very fun girly drink. Like Goldschlager.
Yeah, I mean all that stuff. Like I was a big proponent then as now. If you're going to a bar, like a bar, a guy's bar, because where I grew up, that's all there was. There was dance clubs and like dude bars. If you're at a dude bar, there's only two things you should be doing. A shot of something straight. Like I used to do shots of Jameson, or like a shot of vodka. You're either shooting something straight or you're drinking beer. So he would piss me off because he was trying to be cute. And then we had like this one girl who was kind of in our group. She would go to those guy bars. What do you think she would ask for? Can I have a glass of red wine? Why? Good Lord, why? You know it's not going to be good. It's going to be some like,
they might have a bottle of $2 Chuck lying around.
Not that, dude. Like it's something bottom of the shelf. Comes in like a moonshine jug. Why on God's earth would you do that?
Yeah, these people, man.
I have some weird friends. All right, yeah.
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, as Brian would put it, it's rough.
It is. Well, at Bryden, I think for those of us who know him well, I think definitely falls into that category because when we do shows together, he is slamming some scotch. Let me tell you.
Oh yeah, I don't know if you could tell this, guys, but Bryden's usually drinking during the show. There's a Terror House Radio when he can bother to show up. He's usually drinking. I bet you didn't know that. I bet you couldn't tell.
Yeah, it's so obvious. And he when we do Green Grass, he's a bad influence because I'll start drinking too. But I try to keep it under control. And he's always,
doesn't work on me. Doesn't work on me. I don't think I've done a single episode of Terror House Radio having had a drink.
Oh, you're a good man. Now that's Purity House for you.
Yeah. Well, I don't drink solo just because I'm getting to the point where I only drink when I'm with friends or on a date or something because any amount of one or two isn't going to do much to me. But if I get a hangover, I'm just done the next day. The nausea and stuff, I'm fucking done. And drinking alone is kind of it's not fun anymore.
No, I agree. I mean, if I'm drinking alone, which I do because I'm just kind of antisocial, it's one. I'm not doing it more unless it's been a really shitty day, which I'm currently dog sitting, and this dog is waking me up at ungodly. She woke me up last night at 1 a.m. and I've been running on fumes ever since. So maybe I kick back a few just so I can sleep. But yeah, I agree with you. I'm also at that age now where if I get hungover, it used to be I would wake up hungover at 8 a.m. and by noon I'd be okay. I could be going get some coffee or something. Now I would have to call off work. It would be multiple days, and I would just feel like a schlub and hate myself. So that's definitely the difference.
Yeah.
So yeah. I can't live the scattered scenes of sex and violence lifestyle anymore physically. I just can't do it.
Actually, wait. Now that I think about it, maybe I did do some day drinking during the episodes when I was under lockdown.
Well, I think the bullshit of all of that made us all kind of drunk. I think maybe I honestly thought when that shit first started hitting, okay, we're gonna hit a new era of prohibition because everyone's just gonna get soused during this line, and people probably did. I haven't heard about it. I know I was drinking more than normal when it first hit. Also, I was drinking hot toddies because I read that it was that's a good flu remedy. I was I don't know.
Yeah, I would buy a shit ton of Albanian beer from the supermarket, which is Albanian beer sucks.
I was gonna say that does not sound. Albania I know is a majority Muslim country, but are they beer drinkers? I would assume they would be wine drinkers.
They're wine drinkers, yeah. So, like, the beer there is not great. It's not the worst I've had in Eastern Europe, but like, it's not great. But I would just drink that shit continuously because I had nothing else to do.
What was the worst beer you had in Eastern Europe? What country?
I mean, there's so many bad beers; it'd be difficult to narrow it down. Worst one would probably be in North Macedonia. I forget the name of the brand, but
makes sense.
It tasted. I had this at an Irish bar. For
those are international.
Yeah, exactly. This was, but it said on the menu this was a North Macedonian beer. Well, Macedonian beer.
Pivo, that's your Pivo.
They couldn't be bothered to update the menu. It tasted like caramel for some reason, even though it was a lager or something like that. And I wanted to throw up after smelling it. Actually,
that sounds awful.
I think I chugged it just because I didn't want to waste the money on getting another beer. But like that was the worst beer I've ever had.
Romania. Going back to Romania, Romania has pretty good beer selection, but there was one that they sold it in like plastic, 2 liters, and it was like called Timișoara or something. It was Heineken, but worse.
Yeah, that's not too surprising. The only country in Europe, Eastern Europe, that has a good domestic beer industry would be I guess maybe the Czech Republic has one, but I've never been. But of countries I've been to, the only one that has a good domestic beer industry is Armenia.
Really? That I would assume Armenia, because I know Georgia is a big wine producer. I just assume because that they would just be close to each other, so they would be like more wine based. But
they are. But Armenia has a lot of repats who come from California, so they brought the secrets of craft brew and Mexican food to Armenia.
Armenian Mexican food? Oh, jeez.
Well, there's 2 good Mexican restaurants in Europe, and one of them is in Yerevan. The other one is in Tirana, believe it or not.
That's crazy.
Yeah, the one in Tirana, I became fast friends with the owner. He had lived in New Jersey for a while, working at a Mexican restaurant. He decided to bring the secret back home.
We have the recipe. That's something we should learn.
Yeah, I've talked about this on the podcast before, but Mexican places in Europe, they'll fuck it up in some fashion. Fuck your food up in some fashion.
No cilantro or something.
They'll serve it cold. They'll serve they'll forget the salsa. They'll use the wrong type of they'll use bread instead of proper tortillas. I went to a Mexican restaurant in Budapest, served me nachos with no cheese.
What? That's just chips.
Literally, they it was just heated chips.
Oh. Or they do like shredded Italian cheese and to completely massacre it.
Yeah. So you have to. I would avoid Mexican restaurants aside from in those 2 cities I mentioned.
Again, I would never assume Mexican in either one of those. I wouldn't. I mean, the only place in Europe, like maybe Spain, but why would they have it when you have Spanish food?
Well, it's like it's the repats who bring it back from the U.S. And again, but going back to the topic of beer in Armenia, they have a lot of microbrews, but the domestic beer brands in Armenia aren't that bad. Like Alexander Paul and whatnot. They're not stellar or anything, but they're not bad either. Like if you drink Alexander Paul beer, you're not going to have a bad night.
Well, see, here's the thing. Just based on history, I would assume the beer that's served in Armenia is sort of like the beer you get in Russia, and I've had Russian beer, and it's awful.
Russia's going through like a craft beer renaissance right now.
Really? Well, I had Baltica and stuff.
Like for the past few years, Russians now consume more beer than they do vodka.
Interesting.
It's like they're going upscale. They're going Swipple.
Oh, they're going sideways on us.
Yeah,
that's interesting. I wonder if that's are the French not drinking as much wine anymore? I wonder if there's some weird Americanization of drinking habits. Because craft beer, that is an American. That's where we kind of invented that.
Yeah, more or less. I mean that, and honestly, vodka sucks. Vodka is something.
Yeah, we're in agreement there.
Vodka is something you drink when you don't have anything else.
Right, or if you're trying to sneak something in a water bottle at a game.
Yeah, basically. It's like, good vodka. There's no such thing as good vodka. Good vodka, it doesn't make you throw up. That's really the only criterion.
The only good vodka I ever had was there was a Polish vodka called Zimbrovka, which I dug. But I would just shoot it, and that's it. I wouldn't be like, oh, this, I get the hint of buffalo grass, and this tastes like the type of potatoes that are only grown in southern Poland. Like, it was all right, but yeah, no, vodka doesn't do anything, doesn't get my rocks off to.
There's a good Ukrainian brand of vodka that I drank a lot in Georgia because it was the only one I could find that would mix perfectly with any kind of drink. Like, you pour it in and you wouldn't be able to taste it at all.
Excellent.
Yeah, I forgot the name of it. I'd have to go back there to see what it was, but it wasn't bad. But aside from that, like, I really can't think of any. Well, there's also Crystal Skull vodka, which it's not that a standout, but you do have that cool Crystal Skull fucking.
I was gonna say, is it Mayan?
Yeah. It was created by Dan Aykroyd.
Are you serious?
Yeah. He's like big into that stuff. So and
UFOs.
So he. My understanding is that the vodka is distilled in Newfoundland using Herkimer diamonds that they harvest in upstate New York. They triple distill it through that, and then they create the Crystal Skull container to put it in, like just glass, and they serve it in the Crystal Skull bottles. It's still around, but the only place I've ever seen it in the past few years is at airport duty free shops. It's pretty pricey. It's pretty pricey too, but like. I think it's worth it just to have like that Crystal Skull on your.
Yeah, it does look cool. It does look cool, and then the fact it's one of the Blues Brothers who's making it makes it somewhat cooler, I guess.
Yeah, he's huge into the whole paranormal thing.
Which I can dig. It's just I don't know how the overlap there of ghosts and spirits. Get it? Ha.
But yeah, I mean, nowadays I drink whiskey mainly just because,
because you're a real man.
Yeah, well, I mean, whiskey's a man's drink. Rum is. Beckloff is in the chat. He mentioned rum. Rum isn't bad, but rum
gives me drink.
Yeah, Spanish rum gives me, which is most rum sold in the U.S. is Spanish rum. Spanish rum gives me really bad headaches because of all the sugar.
Yeah.
If you ever had Pusser's rum is fantastic. Yeah.
Speaking of the sugar, I don't know if it's. It might be rum. I'm not sure, but the worst hangover I ever had was on Southern Comfort, just because of the sugar.
Yeah. That's where the hangover. That's where the hangovers come from. From schnapps as well.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, kids, drinking schnapps is a gateway to drug to taking dicks up the ass.
That's right. It's absolutely. You'll be a leather daddy in no time.
But yeah, I think it's time we finally go through the questions that we've been getting. The wonderful questions through Streamlabs. If you have more, you can send it to streamlabs.com/terrorhousemagazine. And as for these wonderful questions, we only have one so far.
Right.
Greg Lansky for $1 says, this episode of Terror House Radio is brought to you by Blacked. Use promo code Welton for 14.88% off your subscription.
You fell for it again.
It's not really falling for it. I am obligated to read these, but I know it's Beckloff sending those. I know it's him. That's his chick. Thank you for the support, Beckloff. And
we did talk a lot about pornography today, so I guess there is some. It finally makes sense.
Yeah, it's thematically appropriate.
Yeah, I think so.
But anyway, that's the only tip we've gotten so far. If you have any more, folks, get them in and we'll read them before the end of the show. But you got to be fast because we've been here for about an hour and a half. I think it's time to start winding down. Ben, is there anything else you want to bring up about scattered seeds of sex and violence that we haven't mentioned yet?
Well, I think the thing that makes this book good to get into is because there's no background. You don't need any continuity. It's just a random assortment of dumb things that have happened in my life and dumb things I've done. So it's just a good. I even say it's like a good toilet read. I mean, something you just pick up, have fun, read in a day, maybe see yourself in my misadventures. Maybe don't feel bad for me. Feel like I'm a poster child for uselessness, whatever. Just have fun. And I think it's good. It's definitely a departure from the other things I've written, which are fiction or poetry. So I think it's definitely for everyone, but I do think that the people who probably would appreciate the most are just dudes in our age range. So if you're a man in your early to mid 30s, then this is the book for you. Yeah. And how can you, like you said earlier, how can you not buy a book with that awesome cover?
Yeah, it's great. I just threw it up on screen again. But yeah, go check out the book when it comes out. Scatter Scenes of Sex and Violence will be out on Friday morning. There's a link in the description. You can see some of the essays that are in it, sampling of the book, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also like to encourage you to buy Ben Welton's other books. If I can get them on screen here, Sick Inside the Citadel and Panic. Let me pull those up on screen.
And Panic is also an audiobook too, so you get to hear my dulcet tones.
Yes, Sick Inside the Citadel will soon be a Panic, soon be an audiobook. You know,
That's right.
It's sluicing from the bowels of Terror House Productions. It will happen. I've got Sick Inside the Citadel up there. You can get that at terrorhousepress.com and on Amazon and other places. And let me pull up.
And also, like, guys, just support Terror House in general. There's some of the best, like, best writing going on right now. I'm not just saying that because Terror House publishes me, but like there's some great stuff. I mean, Andy Nowicki, if you've been kind of involved in the sort of the alt-lit scene, you know how great he is. Ryan Landry, I say Mayer. Is it Mayer Schneider? Mather Schneider.
It's pronounced like Blather, as he enjoys reminding me.
Mather Schneider. Some great stuff. Oh, I've also gotten into, is it TJ Martinelli? He's great.
Martinelli,
yeah, he's great. Pick up his stuff. A lot of good Chinese just support Terror House, please.
Buy our books. We could use the money.
Yes.
So the authors could as well, but us as well. And I'm just
Absolutely.
showing the audiobook version of Panic, which you can get for a cool $4 at terrorhousepress.com. Come on, please, people! I know you spend like $6 on lattes. You blow money on Steam video games. Our books are very cheap and inexpensive.
And please, if I could make a poor man's plea, please buy my books, because I'm tired of looking at thriftbooks.com and seeing the bubble for Panic. This book is not in demand enough for us to keep this book in stock.
Wait, what?
Yeah, please do not hurt my soul, and at least buy maybe one copy. It'll mean I can buy underwear for the month. I don't know. I'm just joking. But yes, please. I don't need to be reminded. I'm already getting less. I'm already getting little money enough as it is. I don't need to have my failures flaunted. So please dispel this. Get rid of this, please.
We're on the crest upwards. Eventually, you'll be cashing $1,000 royalty checks every month. I'll be cruising the world in a yacht.
I am a white trash guy from West Virginia. I am the worst guy to give money to. So maybe I should rethink this. I'll have a Ford truck in no time.
Yeah,
with the brass testicles hanging off the hitch.
Yeah, in a cabin in the woods.
That's gonna happen no matter what.
Like a certain fellow from Montana.
Well, a certain Polish gentleman who may or may not be right about most things, but that's neither here nor there.
But anyway, yeah, go check out the books, and of course, check out the links, to Ben's website and stuff. Hey, Ben, is there anything else you want to plug? Well, I mean, obviously, you probably want to plug the podcast with Bryden.
Yes. So myself and Bryden Proctor, who couldn't be here tonight because he was busy.
He was busy admiring his fat gut in the mirror.
Yeah, and trying to come up with some philosophical reason for being a lazy, fat-gutted alcoholic. Him and I every week do a show called Green Grass. We just did episode 3 a couple days ago. We basically pick a topic, a deep philosophical topic, and then pretend to know that we know anything about it whatsoever. So we've done creativity and the self, and he talks about his favorite philosophers. I pretend to talk about mine. We then do some spicy jokes in between. It's a fun time had by all. If you
can hear the fucking beer cans opening in the background.
Yep. Or you can hear me struggling with a bottle of something, as I was before we started this show. It's great. I mean, and Bryden is as much as we beat up on him, he's a very intelligent guy, and it's a pretty deep. We get into some pretty deep stuff, and if you want some philosophers you may have never heard of before, or if you're more familiar with Sioran or whatever, or Nietzsche, we talk about all that. It's great. It's fun. I do that with Bryden, and I would suggest follow him in the show Green Grass every week.
Yeah. There's a link. You can find it on Bryden's YouTube channel. There's a link to that in the description.
Mm-hmm.
I assume it's on Anchor as well.
I'm assuming, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, go check that out. And of course, you can check out, my website is mattforney.com, and you can find all my shit in the description. I got a couple more news items. Since this is the first show we've done in a month. We'll hopefully we'll be going back to doing regular shows now that Bryden is back from Peru. But we got two big items of news. Our next book after Scatter Scenes of Sex and Violence will be Dragon Day by Matt Pegas. That will be out on May 28th. Yeah, the 28th. That's 2 weeks from now. And more importantly, we've got a huge book coming, Welcome to Hell by Bad Billy Pratt. Many people of his writings and his blog and his collaborations with Ryan Landry. Welcome to Hell by Bad Billy Pratt will be out in early June. He's delivered the manuscript to me. It's great. It's fantastic. It's going to blow your socks off. All of our books will blow your socks off. Mm-hmm. But I feel the need to mention this one just because Bad Billy Pratt's such a big name. But come and go check that out when stay tuned. We got great things coming at Terror House.
There's some great stuff on the horizon. I'm not just saying that because there's like a couple of my books still waiting to come out, but there's a lot of great stuff. Stay tuned to Terror House. Follow all of the true, publishers who are doing real stuff. I think someone in the chat mentioned a bunch of them, and you're right.
Yeah, Antelope Hill, Imperium, and Arctos.
All of those. Great stuff. So, yeah.
And Mystery Grove. Don't forget Mystery
Grove. Yeah, Mystery Grove, yes. Also
Mystery Grove, Expat.
Expat, definitely, too.
Who else am I thinking of? Whatever. Anyway, let's close out the show. Yeah, follow, buy all of our books. Follow what we're doing. Great things are ahead for everyone.
That's right. Keep up the good work and support Matt, for God's sakes. He's doing most of this by himself, and he's doing a great job.
Yes, I'm just whatever. Anyway, that'll do it for this episode of Terror House Radio. But you can check in every day at Terror House Magazine, terrorhousemag.com. Terror Books are at terrorhousepress.com and on Amazon and elsewhere. You can follow our social media links in the description. And, of course, you can always find the latest episodes of the show at terrorhouseradio.com. Terror House Radio is produced by Bryden Proctor. Illegitimate non-coverundum. Don't let the bastards grind you down. I'm Matt Forney with Benjamin Welton, and we are out.
Later.